December evening, Rostov-on-Don. The freezing wind sweeps across the deserted streets as a silent shadow approaches the heavy iron warehouse doors. A sudden violent blow shatters the silent, cold night. The female guard collapses instantly onto the icy concrete, her keys clinking loudly. The intruder's pale hand slowly reaches down, cold fingers tightly wrapping around the heavy brass keyring beside the motionless guard. Within minutes, two dark figures emerge from the warehouse shadows, carrying heavy wooden crates of highly coveted, scarce Soviet household soap. A blinding beam of light pierces the gloom. The militia patrol arrives, shouting commands into the freezing air, triggering an immediate shootout. Our story tonight begins in the chaotic post-revolutionary years, where the legendary bandit Medik ruled the dark underbelly of Soviet Rostov. The post-war Soviet Union faced brutal epidemics, making simple hygienic items like soap more precious than gold on the black market. Ivan Minnikov, once a decorated Red Army soldier, returned from the front lines only to find a city gripped by hunger and greed. Outside a dimly lit restaurant, Minnikov watched his former lover, Katya, laughing with a wealthy, well-dressed businessman of the NEP era. The businessman's hand rested confidently on the young girl's waist, an unbearable sight that instantly ignited a silent, burning rage inside Minnikov. With a sudden stride, Minnikov confronted the wealthy merchant, violently grabbing his expensive lapels and demanding him to back away immediately. The local militia officer quickly intervened, roughly pushing Minnikov back into the dark alleyway, while warning him to stay away from citizens. Exiled to the margins of society, the former soldier realized the war had not ended. It had merely relocated to the streets. By 1922, the name Medik began to echo through the dark alleys of Rostov, whispered in fear and strange admiration. The criminal underworld designated him as Medik, not for any medical training, but for his calculated surgical precision during daring armed robberies. The newly established Soviet Criminal Investigation Department, the Don Ugolovny Rozisk, found itself completely overwhelmed by the gang's sophisticated tactics. Led by Ivan Minnikov, a former locomotive worker from Lugansk, the local militia lacked vehicles, communication, and advanced forensic equipment. To outsmart the authorities, Medik devised theatrical plans, turning each high-stakes heist into a meticulously choreographed, dramatic stage performance. His most famous heist targeted the heavily guarded Rostov State Bank, a secure facility holding vast sums of newly minted Soviet rubles. Three men dressed in authentic Red Army uniforms entered the bank manager's office, carrying official-looking documents under their arms. The leader calmly informed the terrified manager that an imminent bandit raid was expected, and they were sent to guard the vault. As soon as the trusting manager unlocked the heavy iron vault door, a swift, brutal blow to his head silenced him instantly. The disguised bandits quickly emptied the shelves of cash, gold, and valuables, packing everything into heavy canvas sacks within seconds. However, fleeing from the scene, Medik severely sprained his ankle, the heavy, frantic footsteps of chasing militia echoing closely behind him. In a stroke of luck, a young woman named Dusia spotted the limping bandit and immediately rushed to grab his heavy collar. She shook him violently, screaming loudly about his feigned drunkenness, creating a perfect domestic scene to deceive the approaching search party. The pursuing officers glanced at the angry wife dragging her drunk husband and quickly ran past, completely ignoring the legendary gang leader. Once the danger had passed, she turned to the mysterious injured outlaw with a calm smile, inviting him to her home. This fateful encounter marked the beginning of a fierce, protective love that would shield Medik through years of relentless manhunts. As the gang's influence grew, Medik allied with Andrei Matveev, alias Reyka, a bloodthirsty, sadistic killer with no moral boundaries. With a powerful and cold alliance finalized, the combined criminal syndicate prepared to systematically dismantle the defensive security measures protecting Rostov businesses. The newly formed task force inside the militia department desperately analyzed the rapidly accumulating file folders, documenting the gang's increasingly violent operations. Investigator Ivan Minnikov slowly paced the perimeter of his narrow office, his hands clenched tightly behind his back in deep frustration. The investigators realized with absolute certainty that an internal informant was leaking confidential operational details directly to the hidden criminal hideouts. In the dead of winter, a shady, low-level operative walked nervously down an icy street, constantly checking over his heavy shoulder. The shady informant slipped into a secluded, dimly lit alleyway, where Medik stood silently in the deep shadows, waiting for information. The nervous informant handed over a crumpled piece of paper containing the exact schedules of the upcoming security patrols across town. Medik slowly opened the paper, memorizing these strategic details before striking a match to destroy the evidence in a brief flare. The treacherous leak immediately allowed the gang to target the wealthy government cooperative store on the main boulevard without any interference. As the grandfather clock struck midnight, 3 armed bandits smashed through the rear entrance of the locked government commercial building. The ruthless criminals quickly bound the elderly night watchman, shoving him into a cold corner while they plundered the shelves. The bandits focused entirely on collecting expensive textiles, fine silks, and scarce imported goods that could be easily bartered later. A hidden alarm system suddenly went off down the street, forcing the panicked gang to retreat quickly with their heavy bundles. Outside, the bandits threw their stolen goods into a horse-drawn cart and sped away just as the militia patrol arrived. The close call infuriated Medik, who demanded to know why the militia had arrived much earlier than the informant predicted. Back at the secret headquarters, Investigator Minnikov carefully cross-referenced the names of every officer who had access to patrol schedules. His analytical gaze stopped on the name of Fyodor Bashkin, a quiet officer whose family ties raised immediate suspicion. A secret surveillance team was immediately deployed to watch Bashkin's small, isolated brick house located on the outskirts of Rostov. Late that evening, a hidden detective watched through binoculars as a suspicious figure approached Bashkin's door under the dark cover. The visitor was Nikolai Zaitsev, Bashkin's cousin, who served as the direct messenger between the corrupt officer and Medik's gang. The hidden militia squad moved in silently, quickly surrounding both men before they could react or draw their concealed weapons. Inside the cold interrogation room, Bashkin sat in heavy silence, staring down at the concrete floor as the evidence piled up. Faced with the threat of execution, the broken informant finally agreed to reveal the gang's next target to save his life. He confessed that Medik planned to ambush a major industrial paymaster near the railway station late the following Friday afternoon. Armed with this critical intelligence, the Special Task Force systematically set a deadly ambush around the isolated industrial payroll office. 4 disguised detectives took positions inside an empty transit van parked directly across from the target warehouse entrance. The heavy silence inside the vehicle was only broken by the slow, rhythmic ticking of a pocket watch held by the leader. At exactly 4 o'clock, the industrial paymaster approached the heavy security door, carrying a thick leather briefcase tightly in his hand. Suddenly, 2 armed men wearing dark face masks leapt out from behind the towering wooden crates, guns raised high. Before the bandits could touch the briefcase, the hidden detectives kicked open the van doors, opening a heavy barrage of fire. The dynamic close-quarters ambush triggered an immediate tactical response from the elite detectives inside the dark, snow-covered industrial concrete brick courtyard. Medik reacted with terrifying mechanical instincts, quickly drawing his cold, heavy black steel Colt automatic pistol to suppress the advancing militia forces. A violent hail of high-velocity bullets tore ruthlessly through the icy night air, shattering multiple wooden transport crates into sharp, flying splinters. The paymaster collapsed flat onto the hard concrete, desperately covering his bald head with his thick leather briefcase during the gunfight. Realizing the deadly tactical trap, Medik's masked accomplice aggressively hurled a heavy, crude metal pipe bomb directly toward the police van. The crude explosive device bounced twice on the frozen ground, its tiny, glowing white sparks casting long, eerie shadows across the courtyard. A deafening blast shattered the industrial silence, blowing out the glass windows of the transit vehicle and creating a dense, suffocating cloud. Utilizing the dense smoke screen for operational cover, Medik ran limping heavily toward the open iron gates of the outer industrial compound. His masked accomplice was less fortunate, a precise bullet striking his chest, sending him crashing backward into a huge frozen puddle. The dying bandit lay motionless on the ice, thick black liquid slowly pooling around his dark winter jacket as the firefight ceased. The escaping gang leader disappeared completely into the complex web of narrow alleyways comprising the notorious criminal district of Bogatyunovka. The persistent failure to capture the elusive outlaw forced the regional authorities to establish a deeply classified secret department inside Don Ugro. The leadership of this hyper-classified operational unit was handed to Nikolai Machulin, a deeply experienced investigator known for cold, analytical reasoning. Machulin immediately requested the personal service records of every active operative, looking for hidden patterns of localized information leaks. He carefully laid out multiple case files on his large wooden desk, studying the geographic proximity of every single successful heist. The newly collected intelligence revealed deep internal conflicts multiplying between Medik and his sadistic, unpredictable tactical partner, the killer Reyka. Inside a secluded safe house, the two rival gang leaders sat across a wooden table, an intense ideological argument rapidly developing between them. Reyka demanded more brutal public executions to terrify the local community, while Medik strictly favored surgical, quiet, tactical property thefts. Sitting silently in the corner of the room, Dusia listened intently to their deadly argument, her head tilted in deep concern. The alliance was heavily broken. Reyka left the room with a cold threat, leaving Medik alone to plan his next step. Meanwhile, Machulin's calculated strategy began yielding operational results, as two corrupted lower-level militia informants were officially identified inside the force. The corrupt informants were secretly detained during their shift change, prevented from sending any warning signals to the criminal underworld. The total elimination of his internal surveillance network deeply isolated Medik, blindfolding him against the upcoming tactical maneuvers planned by Machulin. To re-establish total dominance over the local territory, Reyka planned a savage, unilateral retaliation campaign against the regional secret police forces. The targeted victim was Machulin himself. The ruthless killers meticulously tracked his daily domestic walking routes across the quiet Derzhavinsky lane. On a freezing late evening, Machulin walked home quietly, accompanied closely by his devoted wife and elderly mother-in-law. Suddenly, Reyka and his cold accomplice stepped out from the deep architecture shadows, heavy firearms raised and pointed instantly. Multiple loud gunshots shattered the quiet lane. Machulin was struck repeatedly, collapsing immediately onto the cold, red-stained, frozen cobblestones. The brutal execution left the legendary operative lifeless, a thick, dark, black liquid slowly pooling beneath his torn, gray uniform jacket. Surprisingly, the killers completely spared the terrified women, leaving them to weep over the cold body as they fled. The horrific execution of investigator Machulin instantly ignited a wave of relentless fury within the top ranks of the regional Soviet secret police. Determined to break the criminal syndicate, the command appointed Grigory Mashansky, a legendary operational specialist, to eliminate Reyka's remnants permanently. Mashansky immediately initiated a thorough, micro-detailed forensic search across the freezing cobblestone lane where the brutal double murder had occurred. A hidden operative slowly lifted a discarded metal lantern near the frozen brick wall, exposing several fresh, heavy boot prints inside the slush. Beside the footprints, the detective carefully recovered two spent brass bullet casings, their cold metallic surfaces reflecting the dim, yellow streetlights. The specialized task force cross-referenced the distinct ballistic marks, confirming that the lethal ammunition originated from a stolen military supply cache. Mashansky utilized a network of local black market fences, planting specific operational disinformation regarding an incoming, heavily guarded maritime cache shipment. The precise bait suggested that a massive commercial payout would be transported aboard the heavy Soviet steamship named Felix Dzerzhinsky. Blinded by immense greed and desperate to re-establish total dominance, Reyka eagerly swallowed the operational trap without consulting Medik. On a foggy early morning, Reyka and three heavily armed henchmen boarded the steamship, disguised as common dock workers. Unbeknownst to the bandits, Mashansky and his elite armed tactical squad had already taken strategic positions within the upper passenger deck. The arrogant criminals gathered on the open wooden deck, loudly opening bottles of clear alcohol, completely oblivious to the trap. Reyka carelessly tossed an empty glass bottle over his heavy shoulder, the shattering sound instantly drawing the attention of the hidden police. Mashansky stepped out calmly from the companionway door, his massive black steel Mauser pistol raised high, giving the order to surrender. The Tanbao Reyka instantly reached for his concealed weapon, but Mashansky's mechanical reflexes were significantly faster, triggering an immediate shootout. A violent barrage of gunfire erupted across the enclosed space, bullets tearing brutally through the wooden deck chairs and canvas canopies. Two bandits were hit instantly by the precise operational volley, collapsing heavily against the iron railings before sliding onto the wood. Reyka was struck repeatedly in the torso, his black revolver slipping from his hand and clattering across the wet floor. The notorious sadistic killer collapsed heavily into a twisted posture, thick black liquid slowly pooling around his dark worker jacket fabric. The entire gang of Reyka was successfully eliminated within minutes, scoring a massive tactical victory for the regional secret police force. The total liquidation of Reyka's syndicate deeply alarmed Medik, forcing the cunning leader to become extremely paranoid and isolated in Rostov. From that day onward, Medik strictly wore a dark cloth mask during heists, hiding his head completely from witnesses. He only allowed his most trusted accomplices into operational planning, including the ruthless, unpredictable bandit famously known as Kerosene. During a sudden localized street sweep, the militia arrested Stepan Kostoglodov, a weaker accomplice who managed the gang's transport horses. Inside the cold, damp interrogation cell, the terrified Kostoglodov completely fractured under psychological pressure, agreeing to reveal Medik's habits. He confessed that Medik frequently visited Dusya's isolated apartment late at night, utilizing the rear alleyways for completely unnoticed entry. Armed with this precise location data, Mashansky methodically deployed a heavily hidden surveillance stakeout directly around Dusya's brick apartment building. Late the following Tuesday, Dusya left her apartment quietly, carrying a small woven basket while constantly scanning the dark, empty street. She felt an imminent threat in the heavy air, completely unaware that two cloaked detectives were watching her movements from the shadows. As she neared the dark intersection, a tall shadow detached itself from the building wall. It was Medik, meeting his devoted lover. In the dead of the freezing night, the hidden special task force observed the romantic, tension-filled reunion of the isolated criminal outlaws. With a sudden aggressive burst of tactical movements, Mashansky and his elite armed detectives completely emerged from the deep architecture shadows. Dusya spotted the flash of dark uniforms instantly and bravely lunged forward, creating a chaotic physical barrier to protect her lover. She screamed into the cold wind with simulated maternal panic, attempting to alert Medik about the deadly tactical ambush surrounding them. The cunning gang leader processed the high-velocity operational threat in a microsecond, spinning around rapidly to draw his cold steel weapon. A detective forcefully grabbed Dusya's trembling shoulders, shoving her onto the freezing cobblestones to clear the clear line of fire. Medik fired 2 high-velocity rounds into the gloom, a sudden yellow flash illuminating his masked face in the night. A precise bullet from Mashansky's long Mauser grazed Medik's left shoulder fabric, tearing a deep hole in his dark trench coat. The wounded outlaw stumbled backward but utilized the sudden operational confusion to dive headfirst into a narrow, dark residential alleyway entrance. The special task force advanced rapidly with raised weapons, completely finding only an empty, mist-shrouded brick passageway before them. Dusya was bound tightly with heavy iron handcuffs, her head held high in a defiant posture of complete silence. Inside the cold, light green walls of a police underscore station, she sat perfectly motionless under the blinding glare of a single lamp. The elite investigators attempted multiple intense psychological methods, but the devoted lover refused to utter a single syllable about Medik. She suddenly broke into a cold, eerie laughter that echoed loudly through the concrete room, mockingly highlighting her absolute loyalty. Meanwhile, Medik retreated deeper into a wet, decaying underground cellar hidden beneath a deserted grain warehouse on the riverbanks. The wounded criminal leader sat on a broken wooden crate, gasping for breath, while tightly binding his bleeding left arm fabric. A thick, dark, black liquid slowly saturated the white cloth strip, dripping steadily onto the cold concrete floor beneath his feet. The desperate leader realized his local empire was completely collapsing, his operational communications entirely cut by Mashansky's persistent strategic movements. Determined to locate the fugitive, investigator Khudozhnikov utilized a highly classified operational asset, an old, retired criminal mastermind named August Schultz. Schultz possessed immense authority within the local underground underworld, having successfully run multiple high-stakes financial swindles during the pre-revolutionary years. Khudozhnikov held a tense, quiet conference with the elderly criminal inside a secluded room at the far end of the police station. The investigator placed a thick, official amnesty document on the table, offering a complete clean slate in exchange for full cooperation. Schultz slowly tapped his white fingers on the table, carefully weighing the freedom against the severe code of criminal brotherhood. The elderly mastermind finally nodded his head, agreeing to establish a luxury, fake criminal safe house under secret militia supervision. The chosen location was a large two-story brick house situated discreetly on the secluded 14th Line Street of Rostov. Schultz carefully furnished the interior to resemble a high-end, illegal gambling den, filled with fine carpets, velvet curtains, and mahogany tables. The specialized task force secretly installed multiple high-sensitivity audio surveillance wires behind the thick wallpaper panels throughout the building. Mashansky and 4 armed tactical detectives took permanent operational positions inside a cold, dark attic directly above the main parlor. The undercover trap was completely prepared. Schultz sent word through the criminal underground that a secure sanctuary was open for elite outlaws. Driven by cold hunger and severe blood loss, Medik finally bit the operational bait, approaching the brick house late on Friday evening. The targeted trap worked flawlessly. Medik pushed open the heavy wooden door of the fake safe house, completely unaware of the hidden surveillance. Schultz welcomed the fugitive leader with a deceptive, calm nod, gesturing toward the mahogany card table covered with bottles of alcohol. Exhausted and suffering from severe blood loss, the bandit leader dropped heavily into a velvet armchair, nursing his wrapped left arm. Schultz filled a crystal glass with heavy, clear alcohol, into which a powerful, rapid-acting sleeping sedative had been secretly dissolved. Medik eagerly grabbed the glass with his trembling white hand and swallowed the drugged alcohol in a single frantic gulp. The heavy glass clattered loudly across the mahogany table surface as the chemical compound immediately began disrupting his nervous system. Within 3 minutes, the fugitive's head slumped heavily onto his chest, his breathing slowing into a deep, chemical-induced sleep. Observing the total incapacitation through the floorboard cracks, Mashansky silently signaled his tactical team to begin the immediate descent. The heavily armed detectives descended the narrow wooden staircase with soundless, deliberate steps, revolvers raised, and ready for operational combat. Mashansky kicked open the parlor door forcefully, his elite team immediately flooding the luxury den and surrounding the sleeping bandit. A detective quickly stripped away Medik's hidden firearms, removing 2 heavy black steel revolvers from his deep overcoat pockets. From his inner lining, they recovered a crude, heavy metal pipe bomb packed with jagged iron nails and black powder. Heavy iron handcuffs were aggressively locked onto Medik's white wrists, permanently ending his brutal 7-year reign of terror. The captured criminal leader was roughly hauled out of the brick house into the freezing morning air under heavy armed guard. Medik woke up inside the cold, light green concrete walls of a police station, staring blankly at the scarred wooden table. Investigator Ivan Khudozhnikov sat across from the legendary bandit, slowly opening the massive yellowed case folder documenting 44 murders. Khudozhnikov laid out dozens of crime scene sketches, ballistic certificates, and intercepted letters directly onto the wooden tabletop surface. Realizing his total operational isolation and the absolute collapse of his syndicate. The unmasked leader maintained a heavy, stubborn silence. The regional authorities moved with unprecedented operational velocity, transferring the massive 64-person case file directly to the emergency regional troika. The extraordinary judicial tribunal consisted of the regional OGPU chief, the party secretary, and the chief prosecutor of Rostov. The emergency operational trial lasted only 14 days, systematically reviewing the vast mountain of material evidence without any public audience. The definitive sentence was finalized on late September morning, condemning 44 core members of the syndicate to immediate execution. Among those condemned to death was Dusia, the devoted lover who had sacrificed her own freedom to protect Medik's escape. In the dark pre-dawn hours, 2 heavy trucks arrived at the prison courtyard, their diesel engines idling loudly in the fog. The bound prisoners were systematically escorted out of the cells, their white heads bowed against the freezing autumn rain. The transport convoy drove slowly through the deserted streets of Rostov, heading toward the isolated perimeter of the Bratsko cemetery. The condemned outlaws were lined up against a long, raw concrete wall at the rear edge of the cemetery grounds. A firing squad composed of 12 elite OGPU executioners stepped forward into strategic positions, heavy rifles raised in perfect unison. A sharp, definitive command shattered the quiet dawn air, followed instantly by a thunderous, simultaneous volley of rifle fire. The bodies collapsed heavily onto the muddy earth, thick black liquid pooling into the soil as the smoke slowly dissipated. The thunderous echo of the firing squad finally faded into the heavy morning fog, leaving an absolute, chilling silence over the entire cemetery grounds. Investigator Kudozhnikov slowly walked back to his awaiting vehicle, his dark boots sinking into the thick, freezing mud near the open burial pits. The dynamic, high-stakes judicial process had ended with unprecedented velocity, permanently erasing the top command structure of Rostov's most notorious criminal syndicate. Back inside the central office of @police_station, a young clerk methodically cataloged the vast mountain of confiscated weapons recovered from the safe house. The clerk carefully placed Medik's heavy black steel Colt automatic pistol into a labeled cardboard storage container, sealing it with thick red wax. He then picked up a large glass jar containing the diffused components of the lethal pipe bombs, tracking each serial item precisely. The remaining lower-level gang members scattered across the region, desperately seeking new hidden shelters to evade the persistent, ongoing police sweep. The specialized task force continued their micro-detailed investigation, focusing entirely on capturing the ruthless bandit accomplice known to everyone as Kerosene. Kerosene had successfully fled the borders of Rostov immediately after the safe house raid, completely changing his operational identity to survive. He traveled deep into the southern territory, settling discreetly inside a small wooden house on the quiet outskirts of Krasnodar city. The fugitive adopted a false name, fabricated clean working papers, and even established a completely new domestic family to avoid suspicion. For nearly 6 years, Kerosene lived a quiet, ordinary worker's life, believing his bloody criminal past had been buried forever. However, inside the secret archives of Don Ugro, the meticulously preserved file on Medik's syndicate remained active under close review. In the early months of 1930, a routine black market internal arrest in Krasnodar unexpectedly exposed the fugitive's secret hideout. A captured local fence traded Kerosene's current geographic location to the secret police in exchange for a reduced prison sentence. The special task force was immediately deployed to Krasnodar, systematically surrounding the isolated wooden cabin during the deep midnight hours. Misha Niski forcefully kicked open the fragile front door, his armed squad instantly flooding the dark room before Kerosene could awaken. The sleeping bandit was aggressively pinned to his mattress, heavy steel handcuffs clicking sharply onto his white wrists. The final remaining core member of the Ruthless Syndicate was successfully secured, completing the absolute liquidation of Medik's network. Kerosene's rapid judicial process lasted less than a week, ending with the exact same definitive execution sentence as his former accomplices. Following the complete resolution of the historic case, investigator Ivan Minnikov officially prepared his final transfer documentation out of Rostov. His outstanding leadership had successfully trained a whole new generation of elite Soviet detectives capable of maintaining absolute public security. The High Command officially reassigned Minnikov to the strategic coastal borders of the Azov region to organize new defensive forces. He left the city quietly on a cold autumn afternoon, carrying only a single leather suitcase filled with personal records. The tragic tactical legacy of the secret specialist Mashansky took a deeply dramatic, dark political turn in the late 1930s. During the chaotic years of the internal party purges, rivals falsely accused the legendary operational specialist of holding secret Trotskyist ties. Mashansky was secretly detained inside his private apartment, undergoing months of intense interrogation inside the isolated cells of the NKVD. Faced with absolute doom, the stoic liquidation expert adamantly refused to sign any fabricated confessions, maintaining his complete innocence. Just before the outbreak of World War II, the High Judicial Review Panel officially exonerated Mashansky, restoring his military decorations. He survived the brutal war years and spent his remaining decades serving as a highly respected administrative leader in the Altai region. The absolute operational liquidation of the sprawling network allowed Rostov citizens to breathe a temporary sigh of relief during the late autumn months. However, a small remnant faction of lower-level black market distributors attempted to quietly revive illegal transactions inside a dilapidated brick tannery building. The newly promoted Regional Militia Command immediately noted a suspicious surge of counterfeit currency circulating throughout the local commercial districts. The micro-detailed forensic examination of the confiscated bills revealed specific chemical signatures identical to the ink utilized by Medik's former counterfeiters. An elite investigative task force was quietly reassembled, taking covert surveillance positions outside the isolated perimeter of the abandoned factory. Late that Friday evening, a suspicious delivery wagon rolled slowly toward the rear loading dock of the dilapidated structure. The delivery operative steps down cautiously, his white hands gripping a heavy leather sack filled with illicit printing plates. The hidden militia squad coordinated their movements perfectly, swiftly closing the outer exit routes before the suspect could sound any alarm. The terrified courier attempted to aggressively discard the heavy bag into the snow, but a detective forcefully tackled him down. The illicit cargo split wide open across the ice, revealing pristine metal plates etched with official state currency designs. The captured distributor was immediately brought inside at police_station, forced to sit under the blinding glare of the central desk lamp. Under intense psychological questioning, the broken courier confessed that the illicit operation was funded by an exiled financier in Novorossiysk. The final investigative report was systematically finalized, permanently securing the complete historical closure of every single operational branch of Medik's syndicate. The severe armed confrontation between order and the criminal underworld faded completely into history, leaving only yellowed document bundles inside state archives. The dark, bloody era of the Rostov bandit kings had finally reached its definitive conclusion under the heavy cover of Soviet law. The systematic investigation expanded deep into the surrounding maritime transport hubs, uncovering a network of hidden drop points used for smuggling contraband. Detectives meticulously combed through the local shipyard archives, pulling out heavily water-damaged logistics registries that dated back to the peak NEP years. The regional command deployed a secret maritime patrol unit to permanently secure the coastal channels leading from Rostov down toward the Azov coastline. An undercover operative monitoring a busy fish market noted highly suspicious patterns of gold coin transactions among several prominent local merchants. The specialized task force cross-referenced the unique markings on the recovered coins, linking them directly to the stolen state bank reserves. The persistent trail led investigators to a secluded, heavily barricaded safe house hidden beneath the floorboards of an abandoned railway tool shed. 4 armed militia officers surrounded the wooden structure silently, their dark boots crunching softly on the frozen, unyielding mud outside. The team leader gave a sharp gesture, signaling the immediate physical breach of the reinforced rear window to catch the suspects inside. With a sudden, violent impact, the glass shattered completely inward, throwing sharp fragments across a dimly lit subterranean basement room. A hidden counterfeiter leapt up in total panic, desperately attempting to burn a thick bundle of forged registries over an open stove. An agile detective lunged through the broken frame, forcefully tackling the criminal to the floor before the evidence could catch fire. The unburned ledger sheets scattered across the cold ground, exposing detailed geographic distribution routes spanning the entire Don territory. The captured operative was aggressively secured with steel chains, permanently ending the last lingering operational fraud of Medik's network. The final remnants of the sprawling criminal syndicate were officially processed inside the cold, peeling, light green concrete walls of a police underscore station. With absolute structural closure achieved, Investigator Kudozhnikov finalized the comprehensive summary report, securing total victory for Soviet criminal justice.